Okay. People are here. Hopefully the image is coming up any second. I have pushed the video to the live stream. Let's see. You guys are going to tell me, guys and gals in the chat, if you can see me. And if you can, which it looks like you can, then welcome to the first episode of any type of content on the C47's YouTube channel for the year 2020. My name is Jem Schofield. This is the C47. We call this one Gearbox. I don't know if it matters. Welcome, people. So who's here? And what happened over the holiday season? What are you thinking about for 2020? Let's talk about gear. Let's talk about anything related to video production. And yeah, welcome. So here we are. Now, first of all, a little bit of housekeeping. It has been quite a long time since there's been any content up on the channel, including the infamous weekly series live stream, Camera and Flask. At the top of this chat, you will see a link. It will be coming back with myself, Caleb Pike, and Ben Barden today at 3 p.m. Eastern Time with drinks and all kinds of shenanigans, which is usually instigated by the people who come to the actual chat. Bad Karma, welcome. Benjamin, welcome. If you have a question, an at the C47 altogether will be great. Bad Karma got the Zhiyun crane, and I'm using it with the G7, and I can zoom on my camera from the gimbal controls. Oh, can you? I don't know. That's a communication thing between the camera company, the manufacturer of the gimbal. I know that as a company, historically, they have connected with a lot of stuff. Pat, howdy. Well, it is the holidays. We don't expect all kinds of, yeah, exactly. Trevor. So, hey, Bill, nice to see everybody. Full frame versus Super 35. Yes, try to take the space away from the at the C47 between the and C47. Andres, how are you? Yes, I know about the earthquakes. I read about that. And I'm sorry to hear that, as if you guys have not had enough going on over there in 2019, and then to start off the new year with that crap, no bueno. Happy New Year, Action Collectibles. So here we are. We're chatting. We are here in the in the throes of it, and I'm excited to be back. It's been and always feels like forever when I'm not doing this on a weekly basis. Have you guys ever organized your stuff? Because I've got to tell you that without fail, every single time I go through this process, that it always gets much, much, much worse before it gets better. And this is no exception. In fact, this is probably the worst it's ever been, because what I'm trying to do is a complete reorganization of all of my things. And if you saw the storage space over there for equipment right now, it is a cluster. I should probably turn off those little notifications. Why am I getting notifications? Mail is on. There we go. That's going to take care of that. So it will get better, and over the next few days, it will get better. And while I don't have the studio space built out, part of the whole point of doing all of this is so that this particular space here is getting ready for it's getting ready for that renovation when the funds are available. So what do we got here? Hey, Jem, happy 2020. We started out, yep, I got that. 1DX roast, 1DX Mark III. We're going to actually talk probably about the 1DX Mark III today. Thank you, Tyler. I did have a Merry Christmas. And did I get any new gear for Christmas? Not really. I mean, I bought a few things between Thanksgiving and Christmas that were just small, but nothing major. Yeah, there you go. I got the boiling P1 light, which I like very much. Had a little bit of a problem with the first one, sent it back. The second one came back totally fine. Bill's asking, I'm unemployed right now too, Bill, but that's the life of being a freelancer. Actually, I'm not totally unemployed. I have a project or two, but nothing huge right now. There are some online job places like Production Hub. It used to be Mandy in the old days. I mean, this is for production-based work primarily. Production Hub also covers post. I don't know how many people are getting work from those resources because I'm not really posting there very much. And yeah, so it's a hard one. I mean, it's still networking, and I don't mean in the, oh, you go to an event and you hand out business cards all of the time, though there are exceptions to that, like the OMPA here in Oregon, I think is pretty exceptional. And it doesn't feel like just a bunch of fanboys and kind of, oh, what kind of swag can I get? It seems like a pretty serious community of content creators. But I think it's just putting your name out there and keeping in communication with people. I don't know what's going to happen with my stuff in the next few months, but I go through these waves where I look for people who have different skill sets, and there's a lot of people like that as well. Let's see. Yeah, Trevor, I'm the same. It's all those little screws, clamps, cables, things like that. In the near future, hopefully, when we kind of get into this whole studio reorganization and build out, I'm going to start to go through some things that I'm using to put sanity into and create organization. The problem with me is that I organize everything and then a job or two or three come along and it just becomes a shit show. And I just, take everything out, get what I need, and then don't have the time or take the time to put everything back that I'm not using for that particular job. And then it just grows and grows and grows. And then you go through through this process of 2 or 3 days of just sort of organizing everything again. So I'm trying to get that sorted this time so that there's really a place for everything. It's so hard to do that. Trevor, you gifted yourself an S1H for Christmas. Jeez, that's a pretty big one. You're now not even going to care about those little screws and clamps and cables and minutia. Yeah, and I happen to be one of those people. What's up, the film guy? I'm one of those people who basically is it is a shit show. I can post that. Hey, with all the new stuff with YouTube, where you have to basically say that this content is not for children and kids, I feel like at times I can say something every once in a while. So yeah, so basically, for me, I have a really good ability to remember where things are, even in chaos. But if that gets moved by somebody else, or I'm not with it when I move it, then it's almost impossible for me to find it. So I go through these all the time, and that's why I'm really trying to get some stuff together so that doesn't happen all the time. Yeah, Benjamin, it's such a major process. Okay, so here we are in 2020. I want to open up the chat to any questions related to equipment. If I don't have experience with a particular camera, lighting fixture, piece of grip equipment, support, then I will tell you. And I won't be the right person to answer the question, but let's open it up in terms of conversation, because obviously I think for many of us, what's happening right now, myself included, is we're here at the start of the year. People are coming back to work who are either clients or potential clients. And this is the time where we're really thinking about, what kind of work we're going to be getting, hopefully sooner rather than later. So, for me, it's kind of an odd time because there's, sometimes situations where you have companies where they have an annual budget and they have to spend money towards the end of the year, and you get a lot of work, some of it which may have to happen in the month of December, some of it spilling over into January. That's happened in the past. And then there are times where, where you don't get a lot of work. And that's been my experience this year. So you're really looking at, okay, so what projects are coming up, and you're now reaching out to your clients and everything else. So it's kind of an odd thing. So I do have a production coming up. Benjamin's asking about the C500 Mark II. It is actually coming in the next few days. I'm not purchasing it, but I'm going to be creating some content around that camera. More on that at a later date. So that is my sort of next production project. I just finished something up for ATOMOS, which will hopefully be dropping soon, which has to do with their firmware update on their quad live HD switching with the Shogun 7 and the Sumo 19. So that's almost wrapped up, or might be wrapped up. I'm just waiting for some feedback on the technical side to make sure that everything is where it should be in terms of information. And the good thing about when I do those projects, even though they're sponsored videos, is they really allow me to have my own voice. So they're not telling me what to say. They're not telling me what type of video to create. What I do, I could say is a courtesy, but I think it's the right thing to do when you're doing a sponsored video for a client, is let them review the video for technical accuracy and just give you any feedback that may be concerns. When you're creating sponsored content, the trick is, at least the type of content I try to create, I'm not trying to create marketing material for that client. I'm trying to create educational content. At the same time, it's always glass half full. You're basically trying to teach people how to use the tools that are there. So for instance, I just did a 3-light kit video for Toda, the Toda LED lights, which is a Lowell product under the Tiffin umbrella. And that was also a sponsored video. There's a link to it in some of my social media posts. You can go to Tiffin's YouTube channel and see the video. And the goal there was to show how to use that 3-light kit in production. And I feel good about using that kit that way. It's not a bicolor light, but it's daylight. It's small, compact, it's versatile. So I actually do make decisions when I make these videos. If I don't feel like it's a tool that people can use in production, then I say that. And sometimes that means I don't get to work, but that's okay. So 1DX Mark III we're going to get to in a minute. Let me just sort of catch up and internalize some of these comments here. Bad Karma got the Zhiyun crane from Facebook Marketplace. That's a great deal. Same, boom. It would help if screw sizes were standardized. Well, yeah, no kidding. 1DX Mark III again in a minute, Tyler. I'm in a new city and I don't really know any, so it will take time. Any help from the chat? What city are you in, Bill, if you don't mind sharing? Thoughts, really expensive as a filmmaker. The C200 makes more sense, at least to me. So Trevor, I'm going to talk again more about that. Joining local groups, boom, boom, boom. Yep, looking forward to thoughts on the Canon. CES like NAB, but with computers and TVs. It is sort of. I'd say it's a consumer electronics show, which is what it stands for, duh. But it is an interesting show because it really sort of shows you what's going into people's homes and living rooms and things like that, which, as far as we're concerned, as content creators, does give us a little bit of a window into what tools we're going to have to be using on the production side to create content for what they're watching their content on. Another sort of interesting trend that I'm seeing from CES this year is in the lighting space, which is we're starting to see, especially because of LED technology, Bluetooth, mesh networks, all this kind of stuff, indoor and outdoor lighting that's going to be very versatile. multiple color temperatures. If this stuff turns out to be reliable, then I'm excited about it, because I think that they're just other tools that we can put in the toolkit, especially because they're tied into being a part of a home. So we talk about using practicals a lot in production. We use practicals a lot in production. And if we can bring into a home environment some tools that fit within the space, as opposed to us having to rig things, then if we can screw in a light and then control that through a system from Philips or whomever, then I think that we all win based on that when it comes to tools that we can use in production. The question is, are there any flicker issues? Can you shoot at different frame rates? Blah, 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 blah. So there you go. Let's see. Happy New Year. Yo, is it a good time to invest in RGB? I've been looking at the WASP 200 Hive Lighting Aladdin. Do you think it's worth looking into, or wait for next generation Cal? RGB lighting technology is very, very interesting right now. I would say that unless you're renting sky panels, which are RGBW, I think what you're looking for is what's already starting to happen with LED RGB technology. So let's talk about that for a second and have a little bit of a discussion about that, because prior till 2-3 months ago, my real understanding of the problems of RGB LED lighting, my understanding was incorrect. So let's just talk about that. I promise I'm going to get to the camera stuff as well, but it's a very interesting question, and I don't want to, I don't want to bypass that. So if you remember, if you're watching things and not under a rock, there was a relatively recent episode of Indie Mogul with Ted Sim and Tim Kang from Quasar, who's also a DP, Quasar Science. And they were talking about what is happening with LED lights when they're emitting spectrum, which we have all known has been a problem in the past. But now we sort of see virtually every new LED light coming out with some sort of RGB mixture in terms of at least red, green, blue LEDs. So what the problem is, well, let me just say what I thought the problem used to be. Most of the cameras that we are now using have the ability to capture in a much wider color gamut than Rec. 709, which, if you look at that triangle of capture, while it has a lot of green, it is, if my math is right, it's somewhere around 35% of our visible of the spectrum that we can see visibly, and so relatively small. You were talking, about a third of what we can actually see, and then as we move to P3, slightly larger, and then when we get to 2020, we get closer to 76, 78%, something like that. And then of course we have these wider gamuts that these cameras can capture as well. So it would be, I don't totally blame myself, but I do blame myself for misunderstanding this. So what I used to think was that the biggest problem that we had was the monitoring, which is still, yes, very much true. We have most of the monitors on the market that are affordable as a 1920 by 1080 resolution. So we're shooting in UHD 4K, DCI 4K, 5, 6, 8K, and we're monitoring on a much lower resolution monitor, which makes it very hard because we have false perceptions in terms of what's sharp in the captured image. But they're also generally limited to most of these monitors to Rec. 709 in terms of that color gamut and being able to reproduce that visibly for us. And some of them are capable of giving us P3, so slightly larger, whatever that is, 41, 42%, I think the numbers. I'd have to look it up again. So I used to think that, look, we're using these RGB lights. They're creating colors that fall outside of the Rec. 709 gamut. The problem is that the monitors that we're looking at them on can't show us those colors. So when we're using a certain color on our RGB light and we see it visibly one way with our eyes, that the reason that we're not seeing it correctly on the monitor is because of the monitor and its limitation. Because the camera clearly can capture that larger gamut. Well, that's not actually the problem. The problem is that with RGB lights, what they're doing is they're emitting a spectrum which is considerably less than what you would get with a quartz halogen, what we would call a true tungsten fixture. And what's happening is that when that light hits an object and then is reflected off of that object and captured by the camera, it is not creating the color that is expected and that camera sensor is tuned to see coming off of the object. So it's the light, it's basically what's coming off of the object that's the problem. And that means that it's a problem with the fixture. So what's starting to happen with people like Tim, and there's a whole committee that's now set up with the ASC, is that different lighting companies, including Hive and Roscoe and companies like that, are working together to try to advance RGB technology, or we'll say color tunable technology, because if you look at a Hive light, you look at the Roscoe, their new lights, there's combinations and formulas and ways that they're creating the new orbiter from ARRI, those emitters that are not just using traditional red, green, and blue. So I think that the end goal, I know that the end goal, but hopefully the end result will be that as we move forward with color tunable fixtures, that the reflected light that is coming off of different types of objects, fruit, skin tone, cars, whatever they are, is going to be interpreted correctly at different color temperatures, because we know that we can only set our camera to one color temperature. And there you go. And maybe camera companies will get even smarter too, and continue to advance white balancing so that it is more akin to what we are capable of doing. Lots of combinations. Yes, you need the gamut, but you need to have the right emitted light that's coming off of objects. And then, of course, you still need to have monitors that can do that. So I hopefully, I'm not answering your question. But the answer is right now, if you're looking for a fixture, make sure that it has at least two whites, an amber and a cooler or daylight, and also red, green, blue. Most of the companies are getting things pretty right, but it's still a little bit of the Wild West right now, and everybody's working on it. Trust me, they're trying to make it better. Aperture's in that game too, so lots of people. All right, so let's see what we got. New Year, same awesome faces I see. Yeah, let's get some new faces, Shiznuts. Any New Year's gears resolutions? New Gear's resolutions. You know, I wouldn't mind a new camera at some point, but we won't worry about that right now. Got to pay for college and all that stuff. The most interesting thing for me is usually the companies that don't show anything when we expect them to. Yeah. So we've got some stuff. We've got some stuff happening right now. Shiznuts, yes, Flask later on, link at the top. So that'll be at 3 p.m. Pacific. You better stock up the fridge, man. Get out there. Good. Yeah, good. Yeah, Shiznuts working with light and the basics of photography and video. That's part of what I'm working on for my new sort of format for my workshops. Yeah. Yeah, there we go. Aperture as a company seems good. Yep. Good. Okay, let's talk cameras, kiddos. Let's talk cameras. What do we got? So we have probably the cameras that people are talking about the most right now are the FX9, right? We've got the 1DX Mark III, which just got announced. We have the C500 Mark II, and then of course the unicorn, which may or may not ever see the light of day, which is lovingly called the A7S Mark III, but who knows if that's going to happen. So I'm going to probably start by just talking a little bit about, again, some viewpoints that I have related to digital cinema cameras. And one of the things that I'm starting to see right now is, oh, Shiznuts, it's really going to the store right now. It's happening, man. So that's what's happening. So if I'm taking a look at the the film guy just canceled pre-order on the 50mm Sue-Ray anamorphic. It just looks ugly. I don't know if that's true. I'm getting one at some point. I'll let you know my thoughts on that. Okay, so you think that the Ursa G2 should also be in the conversation? Okay, Benjamin, let's do it. Okay, let's start with, we'll do 1DX Mark III in a little while. Let's talk about C500 Mark II, FX9, Ursa Mini Pro G2. Shot with the Ursa Mini Pro, never shot with the FX9 as of yet. So full disclosure, I've shot with the FS7 and FS7 Mark II a lot. Pardon me. And C500 Mark II have not shot with, have a lot of experience with Cinema EOS cameras, and have had pretty in-depth conversations with people about the camera who actually have it. And there we go. So C500 Mark II, in a lot of ways, is sort of the beast of cameras here because, well, first of all, it's the most expensive in the three digital cinema cameras that we are now talking about. But it arguably has the most features overall. 5.9K internal raw recording, full frame camera, XF AVC in 4K all the way down to 2K. It's interesting because and I'll get more into this as I have the camera when it comes in and start to talk about it. But what Canon tends to do historically, and every camera manufacturer, unfortunately, for the most part, is create inconsistencies in their implementation of formats, data rates, and resolutions in each of their cameras. So they may have sort of a whole formula worked out for a particular camera, C300 Mark II, and then when a camera like the C500 Mark II comes out, they'll make some decisions in that camera which are a little bit of a head scratcher. For instance, we now have Cinema Raw Lite, which is 12-bit in most frame rates, but it is 10-bit when you get to certain frame rates. I think 59.94, you drop to 10-bit. But the thing is that it doesn't allow you to now do 12-bit XF AVC at 2K resolution, which you could do in the C300 Mark II. So I'm sure the thinking at Canon was, well, look, if people want 12-bit, yes, the data rate's higher, but we're going to give you Cinema Raw Lite. But some people don't want that workflow. And then you start to take a look at a camera like the 1DX Mark III. Sorry, I'm bringing that into the mix. And that camera is capable of recording to CF Express cards internally at 5.5K RAW, but it's CRM, which means it's a mother in terms of file size, up to 2.6 gigabits per second at higher frame rates. And the processing has to be done through a particular application that is really designed, in my opinion, not really for video workflows. And they didn't put Cinema Raw Lite into the camera. So instead of having a 1 gigabit per second, compressed RAW format, they now have this Jagunda sort of non-standard RAW format in my opinion, with everything that we're seeing with cameras. And so when I look at the 1DX Mark III, I say, wow, that's an amazing camera with amazing features. I'm never going to shoot RAW on that camera. And then you start to look at the formats that you can record in when it comes to, that's not good. Okay. What formats you can record in DCI, 4K, and lower resolutions. And you start to look at that and you say, you know what? Why is that not XF AVC? Why are we not standardizing when it comes to video between the Cinema EOS line and what clearly is taking from the Cinema EOS line and putting that into a DSLR body? So I think that that's really the challenge when it comes to that. I think that Blackmagic's actually done a very good job of sort of standardizing what formats you can record on in their different cameras, and they've been very successful. I think that the main thing that makes me nervous about Blackmagic is, again, now they do actually have white papers on their cameras, so I can't knock them for that. One of the best UIs on any camera. I can't knock them for that. But there are situations where people will have those cameras fail out in the field, and unlike ARRI, Canon, and Sony, Panasonic, they don't have a support system for owner-operators where if things go wrong out in the field, they're really going to support you. And part of that is going to be cost of camera, but quite honestly now, what we have available to us in this sort of $5,000 to $15,000 range is pretty exceptional. And while you can say you're getting a tremendous amount for your money out of an Ursa Mini Pro G2 camera, you can't say that you can't go and get another camera from a different company that's not going to have a lot of the advantages of that camera system. And there's no perfect camera system, and there's no camera that's going to give you every feature that you want. And I think that that's true also with the C500 Mark II. It's definitely true of the FX9. That doesn't give you any ability to record off of that full sensor size, 5.9K. What you're getting is 4K recording from that larger sensor, probably oversampling and giving you a really great image. That said, we don't know in the future what external RAW options are going to be available. Historically, Sony has given us a lot of options related to that. So again, you have to really evaluate which camera is going to be right for the type of work that you're doing. 1DX Mark III to me is a camera that is designed for very high-end sports and wildlife action photographers that have very high-end video features that may be adopted in certain situations by those shooters and people in Hollywood. And then there will be there'll be a percentage of people that will take advantage of the camera for gimbal work, things like that. But a lot of these other cameras are getting so small when it comes to digital cinema cameras. I mean, the C500 Mark II body is not a large camera body that you might be better suited to take a camera like that up, or a small red camera when you are shooting those things. The other thing that I'll say, and this is a conversation that I had, and I will get to the chat in a minute, is that the type of content that you shoot can have a dramatic effect in terms of what type of camera system you're getting. And I know that that's a broad-based statement, but let me just bring that down to narrative work more specifically. One of the things that should be really understood about sensors generally in both Sony and also Canon cameras is that you really have to feed those sensors a lot of light in order for you to be able to get the image where you want it to be in post-production. That doesn't mean that you can't correctly expose your image in production, especially at lower ISOs, and get an image that is what you want. But when you're shooting with newer red sensors and you're shooting with the Alexa sensor, you as a DP or cinematographer really have the ability to shoot at very low light levels, and the cameras perform, or those sensors perform so exceptionally well, not older red sensors, but the newer red sensors, at at lower ISOs, but they're giving you tremendous dynamic range in the shadows area without a lot of noise. So even if you lift those blacks and those shadows a little bit, you tend to be able to hold that image a lot more successfully than if you were shooting with, let's say, the sensor that's in Cinema EOS cameras, where you basically have to dial in your ratios to where you need them to be. But you not only have to dial in the ratios in terms of your light where you need it to be, but you still have to feed more light to that sensor so that when you get into post, that you are essentially pulling the image as opposed to pushing it, which means that you're bringing it down as opposed to lifting it up. So, Bill, I don't have any opinions of the GH5 because I don't really shoot with the camera. I shot a decent-ish amount with the GH4, not a ton, but enough to say that I've shot projects with it. I like the camera. I'm not a big fan of micro four thirds. I know that you can use speed boosters to increase that, that angle of view, and also gain a stop and all of that fun stuff. But to me, it's not an ideal workflow. I think that the GH5 and the GH5S are amazing cameras, but I can't really tell you where I think the evolution of that is going to be. I think it's in the S1H and the S1 series. I think they'll hold on to that GH5 for a long time like they did with the GH4, and I've said that before. I think it's great that you put your Ursa Mini Pro G1 through brutal conditions and it's never failed. I think that the problem is that if it does fail, then that's the issue, is that there's just not the support system. So knock on wood, Apple box right here, that just continues to perform for you the way you need it to. So Tyler thinks that the C300 Mark III will have 12-bit 1080. That is possible. We don't know what that next camera or Cinema EOS camera is going to be from Canon. I'm hoping that they continue to evolve and create cameras that are going to come out in that price point as well. I don't want it to be C200, C500 Mark II. You could argue that the C300 Mark II is in there as well. But I think that there will be a time where you need to slot another camera sort of into that $10,000 price range, which just means that we all win, because quite honestly, the C300 Mark II is an exceptional camera system. And while you can argue that it doesn't have internal RAW recording, what it is capable of doing is very good. C500 Mark II is really weird because they have these really high, I think 810 megabit per second data rates that you can shoot at higher frame rates, but then it drops to a lower bit rate when you're shooting at lower frame rates, which is the opposite of what you would think, because there's more processing necessary for those higher frame rates. So that'll be another thing that I'll have to get into at a certain point. Let's see what we've got here. What's my opinion on buying a C300 Mark I? I just love the look from that sensor. I would definitely say that the C300 Mark II would be where you want to look. C300 Mark I, obviously you're limited in, you're just talking about the regular C300, I'm assuming, unless you do mean the Mark II, is you're limited to basically a 2K camera system, 50 megabits per second internal to CF cards. And I think that maybe what you really want to do is just wait until the price drops on the C300 Mark II. I think that if you get the Touch Focus Kit, which has the same monitor that comes with the C200 and the MA400 XLR unit, that's just a killer camera for lots of different types of work. So there we go. What else we got here? Good. So Cinema Rolite is a nice format, but it's huge. It's huge. I mean, 1 gigabit per second is pretty big. At a certain point, though, you have to find that sweet spot where when you want to record at least 10-bit 422, that you have to have a high enough data rate where you can push and pull the image as you'd like. I would say that the beginning of that sweet spot is at about 400 megabits per second, which is what you have on the C300 Mark II when you're recording with that. Happy New Year, Alex. What's the new flexible LED light scene? I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of flexible LED lights. I tend to use the Flex lights from WESTCOTT. I like the fact that they have lifetime warranty. They're well built. They produce a nice quality of light. Generally, they're very unpanely, which means you have lots of little diodes. And I tend to bounce and diffuse them all of the time. So I rarely use those lights in their sort of native format because there's just too many shadows that are being cast. But you have the same problem with standard 1x1 panels. I think that they're getting better, they're getting less expensive, and I think overall we will continue to see that form factor evolve. And I love some of the things that I'm seeing, you know, that you can pack flat and then open up to a 2x2 and things like that. I'm primarily using flexible LEDs as bicolor lights anyway. I think that it's great that they have RGB capabilities, but for me, long term, I'm looking for flexible LEDs that can get as large as possible, but pack as small as possible. And I really want to be able to use color temperatures between about 2,500 Kelvin up to about 10,000 Kelvin. And that covers, that Kelvin range covers virtually all of the stuff that I'd want except for accent lights. And then I think we start to get into things like, you know, the P1 light, the Pilot Fly light, obviously the MC light, the Luxli lights, these smaller LEDs that can be used for accents. And then of course, tubes. So if you want to do washes and things like that, tube-based LEDs like the ones from Quasar Science, ASTRA, things like that are really, I think, great for that type of stuff. And we'll just sort of see how it all evolves. I think that the new light that's going to come out from Aputure looks really interesting. And I also think that sort of what we're seeing with the orbiter light from ARRI is also going to help drive sort of what's happening with a lot of these fixtures in the future. The things that I really want to get my hands on are the Roscoe RGB fixtures, because I've heard pretty much nothing but good things about them. Benjamin says, new 1DX Mark III doesn't seem like a smart call for primarily video shooters. I would agree. I would say, look, you have a C200 that costs the same price, and that is a camera that's capable of recording cinema raw light. Arguably not as versatile in terms of recording other video formats, because you are limited to essentially a Rec 709 gamut. But you have better gammas when you're recording to the SD cards, and you are limited to 150 megabits per second in XF ABC or in MP4. So there you go. Blah, blah, blah. It sounded like Charlie Brown, but you guys know what I'm talking about. I think Blackmagic RAW is a game changer. And the fact that it's getting implemented in pretty much all of Blackmagic's cameras is fantastic. Any thoughts on the FS5 Mark II in the current market? Cameron, great price point. I cover that camera in my 4K for 10K camera series with Able Cine, which came out the year before last, which is crazy. It's a camera that's very capable, but it is probably my least favorite camera in the under $10,000 price range. It's kind of this weird hybrid of an A7 series camera in a shrunken version of an FS7. And so you get some of those great features that come on the FS7 Mark II series, but when it comes to formats, when it comes to the codecs, and it comes to the recording data rates, you're severely limited unless you use RAW out. And I think that that's really, you know, it's really sort of today's FS700, which was a great camera back in the day. It's got better dynamic range in that camera and other features. But I think where it'll get really interesting with Sony is when we see the technology that's in the FX9 in an FS5 Mark II replacement, because we're going to get better color for sure. Hopefully we're going to get some better data rate recording. I don't want to be recording at 100 megabits per second in UHD 4K. Again, I think 400 megabits per second is sort of minimum and we want 10 bit 422. And then I think that the other big thing that camera needs is it needs a strong AF system. So whatever that's going to be, an FX5 or whatever they call that camera, I think would be really interesting. Andre says he's loving the Nanlite 150, the mixed panel 150, with the FIILEX 360. Cool. Yeah, I've got a FIILEX light right there as a kicker, and that's the Nanlite mixed panel in sort of the diffuse setting, bounced off of some beadboard. And I'm very happy with those lights as well. I think that the main downside to the Nan lights is they don't have that app infrastructure that you're seeing from companies like APUTURE and other companies. Is there any piece of gear, Gerald asks, that is coming out this year that I'm really excited about? I don't know. I don't know what's coming out. I'm not under any NDAs right now, so I can only crystal ball and look at the rumors and in terms of stuff. I'm interested to see what Fuji does if they do it this year as a follow-up to the X-T3, because I think for mirrorless cameras, price point wise, feature wise, they're some of the most compelling on the market. Lighting wise, I'm just hoping that we start to see even more accurate RGB fixtures, and we see more hard fixtures in terms of LED lighting. So I love what's happening with the spotlight. I love that we can put lens solutions on chip on board LEDs. I want more of that. And, you know, we look at the Orbiter, and while most people won't be able to buy that light, they'll be able to rent it. And the fact that you can take a whole series of modifiers and take that harder light and change it, which you can, of course, do with a 300D2 from APUTURE, 120D2, be able to put it into a lantern, to be able to, you know, to put it through the spotlight, to be able to put a Fresnel on there. I think version 2 of their Fresnel apertures is far better than the original version. You know, that's it. I'd love to see Fuji making cinema cameras as well, Benjamin. I don't think it's going to happen. I am kind of excited about also medium format when it comes to Fuji. I think that everybody sort of has this full format, 35 millimeter equivalent sensor size game going on. And the whole notion of IMAX in your pocket could be really interesting for Fuji, because they're obviously building out the lenses necessary for that. And, you know, I think that the downside for Fuji is they make incredible glass. They have really nice optics, but we can see from that 16 to 80 they just came out with that they really didn't design that lens for video. And so they may be able to incrementally improve it over time with firmware updates. But in reality, we really need to see other lenses from them. Now, of course, they make, you know, that 18 to 55 and that 50 to 150. And if I had one request right now, it would be, hey, even if you just leave that lens and it's only for Super 35 and not full frame, can you please create a version of that lens in EF mount? Because then when you're taking a look at cameras like the C300 Mark II, perfect fit. And then even the C500 Mark II, you know, the thing that's really great about that camera in terms of what you can do with it is that you can set it up in XF AVC in 4K full frame, and you can record full frame. You can also then change the camera and shoot Super 35 or 16. And so the possibilities there are really huge. Now, I'm not saying that companies like Sony haven't done similar things in the past. It's just really nice to be able to see that in a full frame camera where you can basically step down to all of those when you're using your lenses in production. It gives you a lot of possibilities in terms of what you can do. Yeah, Aperture Lantern's a nice product. Most interested in is the which this? Trevor, what's this light? You say Relio 2, and you can print your own accessories for it. Send me a link on that. Yeah, Fuji should make a medium format cinema camera. That would actually be very interesting. I think that the FP from Sigma is a really interesting camera. I haven't used it yet, so jury is out. I don't know what to think about that camera yet until I actually use it. I love the concept behind it. I love the idea behind it. Again, similar to the 1DX Mark III, I wish that the RAW format was a little bit friendlier overall, but that's basically it. What is the Relio 2? Tell me, what's this light that I don't know about? Am I losing my mind? Somebody send me a link to this thing. Everybody's going crazy on this thing. It's a small cube light that reproduces a natural sunlight look. Thank you, Trevor. I appreciate that. Let's see. Let's pull up the Googles, and I'm just going to see a picture of what this thing looks like at least. Let's see what we got. Come on, kids. Oh, so it's kind of like the cube light. Very similar. Compact. How much is this sucker? 2nd gen. Oh, it's a light cube. Yeah. 3D printable stuff. Okay, so this form factor I know. And how much is this sucker? Anybody want to tell me? Ooh, look at this. Person's opening up a 6-light kit. Looks very interesting. Let's bookmark that sucker. Okay. Very interesting. Okay. Thanks, kids. All right. Marco, the CEO, is super cool dude. All right, Tyler. I'll have to maybe talk to Marco. See what these things are all about. Yes, I know, Benjamin. They're never going to make an EF version of those lenses. I know. Okay. What else we got here? Is there a particular piece of gear? Okay, we answered that. Happy New Year. What's the new flexible 3C300? Any thoughts on boom? The new doesn't seem to. Yep. I think I'm covering all of this. What have I missed in terms of questions here that I haven't gotten to? And what other questions do you all have? Because it's been a pretty good conversation here. €1,000 for the 6-light Relio 2 kit. Okay, that's Cine in the 6. Thank you. So, okay, so less than €200 per light. So that's pretty interesting. I'm going to read up about that a little bit more after this live stream. And there you go. My goodness gracious. So what else do we have, everybody? By the way, before I forget, because we are getting kind of close to the end of this thing, there's the link. That's today's episode of Camera and Flask. It's coming up in a little over 5 hours from now, 3 p.m. Pacific time. And we're all back. It'll be all 3 of us. Yeah, PL version would be okay too. Just need a PL version of those 18 to 55s and the 50 to 150. And then we'd be able to adapt that to most cameras because there are generally PL mount adapters for most of those camera systems. Travis, did you miss what? What did you miss? This? Yes, you missed this. It's always at 9 a.m. if I do a live stream. And generally, if I post an episode on the channel on Wednesday, which is when they go up, and it's a recorded episode, it's also scheduled for 9 a.m. Pacific. Good. Bart's going to be here for Camera and Flask tonight. Am I going to have any hands-on with the Z Cam? I could. Talking to DVE store about that. So maybe in the future, I'm really interested in those. I mean, the fact that they have cameras that are starting at $799 US for a little cinema camera is pretty phenomenal. That's a Micro Four Thirds version, but they are really, really interesting. They're kind of becoming what I thought Kinfinity would become. But I think they've got their shit together a little bit more in terms of marketing and sort of how they are presenting the camera to the US market, at least. I think in turn that could be argued also for the European market. So I'd love to shoot on the Z Cam at some point. I think at the moment I'm really focused on getting this space together and just creating more content. So that's all going to be good. New Mac Pro for Bart. Congratulations. There's definitely a new MacBook Pro in my future. But as with all things, you have to consider where the money gets spent. In the order of importance, it's going to be education, food, and housing. Those are all in one big container. And then studio space, at least the raw space built first, and then new computer system. And then we'll talk about cameras. Yeah, I think this year, maybe not next year. I hope that this year will be the year of less expensive anamorphics. Most anamorphics are 2-to-1, but for cameras that are natively 17:9, or you're finishing in 16:9, then 1:3:3 to 1 would really make more sense in terms of anamorphic lenses. And there's not a ton of those yet. So we'll sort of see how this all plays out. But I think so. Yeah, Kinfinity moved a little slow, I think. Zcam is the Aperture camera companies. Now they just need a TED. That's all they got to do. Yeah, Bart, you needed a new computer. You needed a lot of things. I'm glad you're picking up the pieces, and looking forward to having everybody on the show later on today. I'm looking forward to chatting with my friends again and all of you in the chat. It's going to be a little bit different than this. We're going to be talking, obviously, about what we've been doing and sort of where we're seeing some things go. But we really want to make sure that we're also figuring out what next week's episode is going to be, what the topic of that's going to be for Camera and Flask. And, let's kick off 2020. So I'm going to go to the logo now. It has been a pleasure, as always, to chat with everybody. Hopefully there's been some information inside of this episode that is useful to some of you, especially when we're talking about things like RGB LED lights and cameras and formats and all of that fun stuff. As always, love doing these live streams, working on a new series for the channel. I think it'll be fun. It's going to take a few weeks to kind of get that off the ground, but it's definitely in play right now. So we'll see what happens with that. And I'll see everybody later on if you're able to make the Camera and Flask episode. And thanks for watching.